Krishna 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 Hey Krishna 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 Rakshama Krishna 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 Pahima Krishna 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 Hey Krishna 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 Hey Krishna 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 Rakshama Krishna 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 Pahima Rama Raghava Rama Raghava Rama Raghava Rakshama Krishna Keshava Krishna Keshava Krishna Keshava Pahima Rama Raghava Rama Raghava Rama Raghava Rakshama Krishna Keshava Krishna Keshava Krishna Keshava Pahimam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashtyatyat Deshattarine Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasa Adigor Bhakta Vrinda Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasa Adigor Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Haraye Nama Krishna Yadavaya Namaha Gopala Govinda Rama Sri Madhusudana Haraye Nama Krishna Yadavaya Namaha Gopala Govinda Rama Sri Madhusudana Haraye Nama Krishna Yadavaya Namaha Gopala Govinda Rama Sri Madhusudana. Om apavitra pavitro va sarva avastang gatopi va StMoritz pundarika akshang sabhaya abhyantara shuchihi. Sri Vishnu, Sri Vishnu, Sri Vishnu. Om Agyana Timarandhasya Jnana Anjana Shalakaya Chakshur Militang Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Mukam Karoti Vachalang Pangam Langhayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamahang Vande Sri Gurum Dinacharanam. Yat Kripa Tamahang Vande Parama Ananda Madhavam. Trinad Api Sunichena Tarar Iba Sahishnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadahari. Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama Eva Kevalam. Kalo Nastyeva, Nastyeva, Nastyeva Gatir Anyata. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, we're continuing with our prayers of the personified Vedas. Today, we will study 2 episodes. This first one is called The Essence of All Vedic Ritualistic Performances. The personified Vedas continue to pray, O Parama, O dear Lord Krishna, considering all points of view, if one has to worship someone superior to oneself, then just out of good behavior, one should stick to the worship of your lotus feet, because you are Adhipati, the ultimate controller of creation, maintenance, and dissolution. You are the controller of the 3 worlds, Bhur, Bhuvar, and Swar. You are the controller of the 14 upper and lower worlds, and you are the controller of the 3 material qualities, goodness, passion, and ignorance. Demigods and persons advanced in spiritual knowledge are always engaged in hearing and chanting about your transcendental pastimes, because that has the specific potency of nullifying the accumulated results of sinful life. Intelligent persons factually take a dip in the ocean of your nectarine activities and very patiently hear of them. Thus, they immediately become freed from the contamination of the material qualities. They do not have to undergo severe penances and austerities for advancement of spiritual life. This chanting and hearing of your transcendental pastimes is the easiest process for self-realization, for simply by submissive oral reception of the transcendental message, one's heart becomes cleansed of all dirty things. Thus, Krishna consciousness becomes fixed in the heart of the devotee. Now, Prabhupada will explain what the personified Vedas just prayed. Prabhupada writes, the great Mahajan authority, Bhishma Dev, has also given this opinion: Bhaktya Vesha Mano Yasmin Vacha yan nama kirtayan. Tiyajan kalevarang yogi. Muchite kama karma bhi. The process of chanting and hearing about the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the essence of all Vedic ritualistic performances. Now, the personified Vedas continue. Dear Lord Krishna, the devotee who wants to elevate him or herself simply by this process of devotional activities, especially by hearing and chanting, very soon comes out of the clutches of the dualities of material existence. By this simple process of penance and austerity, Krishna as Supersoul within the devotee's heart becomes very pleased and gives the devotee directions so that one may go home back to Godhead. Prabhupada now comments. It is stated by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, Jitatmana prashantasya param atma samahita shitoshna sukha dukeshu tatha mana pamanayo jnana vijnana triptatma kuta stho vichitendriya yukta iti uchyate yogi sama lostrashma kanchanaha. Krishna says in the 6th chapter that one who engages all activities and senses in the devotional service of Lord Krishna becomes completely pacified because the Supersoul is satisfied within one. Thus, the devotee becomes transcendental to all kinds of dualities, such as heat and cold, honor and dishonor. And being freed from all dualities, one feels transcendental bliss and no longer suffers cares and anxieties due to material existence. Krishna in Bhagavad Gita confirms this later on in chapter 18. Brahma bhuta prasanatma na shochati na kangshati samak sarveshu bhuteshu mad bhakting labate param bhaktya mam abhijanati yavan yash chasmi tatvataha tato mang tatvato gyatva vishate tad anantaram. The devotee, who is always absorbed in Krishna consciousness, has no anxieties for his or her maintenance or protection. Being constantly absorbed in Krishna consciousness, one ultimately achieves the highest perfection. And while in material existence, the devotee lives very peacefully and blissfully without any cares and anxieties. And after quitting this body, one goes back to home, back to Godhead. This is also confirmed by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, where he says, Avyakto shara iti uktas, tam ahu paramang gitim, yang prapya na nivartante, tad dhamma paramang mama. And also Krishna says in his Gita, na tad basayate suryo, na shashanko na pavakaha, yad gatva na nivartante, tad dhamma paramang mama. My supreme abode is a transcendental place where going, no one returns to this material world. Anyone who attains the supreme perfection, being engaged in my personal devotional service in the eternal abode, reaches the highest perfection of human life and doesn't have to come back again to this miserable material world. The personified Vedas continued praying. My dear Lord Krishna, It is imperative that the living entities be engaged in Krishna consciousness, always rendering devotional service by the prescribed methods of hearing and chanting, and also executing your orders. If a person is not engaged in Krishna consciousness and devotional service, it is useless for him or her to exhibit the symptoms of life. Generally, it is accepted that if a person is breathing, then he or she is alive. But a person without Krishna consciousness can be compared to a bellows in a blacksmith shop. The big bellows is a bag of skin which exhales and inhales air. And the human being who is simply living within the bag of skin and bones without taking to Krishna consciousness and loving devotional service is no better than the bellows. Similarly, a non-devotee's long duration of life is compared to the long existence of a tree. One's voracious eating capacity is compared to the eating of dogs and hogs, and one's enjoyment in sex life is compared to that of the hogs and goats. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Scene number 5 is entitled The 5 Departments of Existence. The personified Vedas continued to pray. This cosmic manifestation has become possible because of the entrance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead as Mahavishnu within this material world. The total material energy becomes agitated by the glance of Mahavishnu, and only then does the interaction of the 3 material qualities begin. Therefore, it should be concluded that whatever material facilities we are trying to enjoy are available only due to the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Within the body, there are 5 different departments of existence, and they are known as Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, and at last, Anandamaya. In the beginning of life, every living entity is simply food conscious. A child or animal is satisfied only by getting nice food. So this stage of consciousness, in which the goal is to eat sumptuously, is called Annamaya. Here, the context of the word Anna means food. Number 2, after this, one lives in the consciousness of being alive. If one can simply continue his or her life without being attacked or destroyed, then one thinks him or herself happy. This stage is called Pranamaya, or consciousness of one's existence. After this stage, when one is situated on the mental platform, that consciousness is called Manomaya. Material civilization is primarily situated in these 3 stages: Annamaya, Pranamaya, and Manomaya, because the first concern of civilized persons is economic development. The next concern is defense against being annihilated, and the next consciousness is mental speculation, the philosophical approach to the values of life. Now, If by the evolutionary process of philosophical life, one happens to reach the platform of intellectual life and understands that he or she is not this material body, but is instead spirit soul, then by evolution of spiritual life, one comes to the understanding of the Supreme Lord or the Supreme Soul. When one develops one's relationship with the Lord and executes devotional service, that stage of life is called Krishna consciousness, or the Ananda Maya stage. Ananda Maya is the blissful life of knowledge and eternity. As it is stated in the Vedanta Sutra, Ananda Mayo Vyasat, the Supreme Brahman and the subordinate Brahman, or in other words, the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entities are both joyful by nature. But as long as the living entities are situated in the lower four stages of life, such as Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, and Vijnanamaya, then they are still considered to be in the material condition of life. But as soon as one reaches the stage of Anandamaya, he or she becomes a liberated soul. This Anandamaya stage is explained by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita as the Brahma Bhuta stage. Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma na sochati na kankshati samak sarveshu bhuteshu mad bhakting labati param. There it is said that in the Brahma Bhuta stage of life, there is no anxiety and no hankering. This stage begins when one becomes equally disposed toward all living entities, and then it expands to the stage of Krishna consciousness, in which one always hankers to render service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This hankering for advancement in devotional service is not the same as hankering for sense gratification in material existence. In other words, hankering remains in spiritual life, but it becomes purified. So when our senses are purified, they become freed from all material stages, namely Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, and Vijnanamaya, and they thus become situated in the highest stage, Anandamaya, or the blissful life of Krishna consciousness. But Mayavadi philosophers consider Anandamaya to be the state of becoming merged into the Supreme. To the Mayavadi philosophers, Anandamaya means that the Supersoul and the individual soul become one. But the real fact is that oneness does not mean merging into the Supreme and losing one's individual existence. That needs to be repeated. But the real fact is that oneness does not mean merging into the Supreme and losing one's own individual existence. Merging in the spiritual existence is the living entity's realization of qualitative oneness with the Supreme Lord in one's eternity and knowledge aspects. But the actual Anandamaya, or blissful stage, is obtained when one is engaged in devotional service. That is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita by the words Mad Bhakting Labate Param, which appear in chapter 18. The Brahma Bhuta Ananda Maya stage is complete only when there is the exchange of love between the Supreme and the subordinate living entities. So unless one comes to this Ananda Maya stage of life, one's breathing is like the breathing of a bellows in a black ship's shop. One's duration of life is like that of a tree, and he or she is no better than the animals, like camels, hogs, and dogs. Undoubtedly, the eternal living entity cannot be annihilated at any point, but the lower species of life exist in a miserable condition, whereas one who is engaged in devotional service of the Supreme Lord is situated in the pleasurable or Ananda Maya status of life. These different stages described above are all in relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although in all circumstances there exist both the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entities, the difference is that the Supreme Personality of Godhead always exists in the Anandamaya stage, whereas the subordinate living entities, because of their minute position as fragmental portions of the Supreme Lord, are prone to fall to the other stages of life. And that is why the living entities are called Tatastha Shakti, marginal potency, because they have the facility to remain either in the material world or in the spiritual world. When the Supreme Lord enters this material world, he remains in that Anandamaya stage and is still above the material energy. But the living entities coming in contact with this material atmosphere become overwhelmed, overpowered, and identify with the material energy. Therefore, they are called fallen because of that ability to either enter the material consciousness or rise above, Tatastha. Although in all the stages, both the Supreme Lord and the living entities exist, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is always transcendental to our concept of life, whether we are in bondage or in liberation. The whole cosmic manifestation becomes possible by the grace of the Supreme Lord. It exists by the grace of the Supreme Lord, and when it is annihilated, it merges into the existence of the Supreme Lord. This is yet another way of explaining what we mean by the phrase absolute truth. As such, the Supreme Lord is the supreme existence, the cause of all causes, Sarva Karana Karana. Therefore, the conclusion is that without development of Krishna consciousness, one's life is simply Shrama Eva Hi Kevalam, a waste of time. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. First, I quote from something Prabhupada mentioned in this section. Prabhupada wrote, "This hankering for advancement in devotional service is not the same as hankering for sense gratification in material existence. In other words, hankering remains in spiritual life, but it becomes purified." So, this concept is important because those who are impersonalists or Mayavadis, they will now say, see, you devotees, you Vaishnavas, how are you any better or different than the fruitive workers? Because you still are hankering. So the problem is, the Mayavadis do not make a distinction. They think all hankering is material. And that's why they say everything is Maya. Everything except the one impersonal absolute truth, Brahman. So the Mayavadis cannot appreciate that there is a thing known as transcendental hankering. Just like we have explained many times, when Radha and Krishna are experiencing separation, externally it appears that they're crying and suffering. But actually, it is Ananda. Same way, Ram and Sita. When Sita was supposedly kidnapped by Ravana, Sita and Ram experienced Vipralamba Seva, intense separation. Although it appeared that Ram was crying and that Sita was crying, because externally it looked that way, still they were experiencing transcendental bliss. So the impersonalist Mayavadis cannot understand that. They can't accept it. They can't appreciate it. They can't go there because it would nullify their theory of oneness without distinction. But in the philosophy of the Bhagavatam, in the philosophy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, everything is there. Happiness, distress, and all the emotions are there as they are in material life. But because they're on the absolute platform, there is no distinction when you are on the spiritual plane between happiness and distress, because both of them are ananda, blissful. So, I found this. In his talks with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Ramananda Roy quoted the following verse. Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavita Mati Kriyatang Yadi Kutopi Labjate Tatra Laulyam Api Mulyam Ekalam Janma Koti Sukrutaya Na Labjate. So the reason why I picked this verse is because of this word laulyam. Laulyam means intense greed. Now, those of us who have studied chapter 16 of Bhagavad Gita, we learned from Krishna that there are 3 gates leading to hell, one of which is material greed. But this laulyam is not material greed. It is transcendental greed. It is spiritual greed. What is it? It is a greed that makes the devotee hanker for Krishna so much that the devotee is willing to do anything to get the mercy of Krishna. Laulyam here means intense desire to get accepted by Krishna. So, this verse that was quoted by Ramananda Roy was also accepted by Rupa Goswami in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Here is the translation. Pure devotional service in Krishna consciousness cannot be had even by pious activities in hundreds and thousands of lives. It can be attained only by paying one price. What is that price? The intense greed to obtain it. So if it is available somewhere, one must purchase it without delay. Here, the word laulyam means greed. However, in Gita, Krishna says, Tri vidhang narakas yedang dwarang nashanam atmanaha kama krodas tata lobhas tasmat etat trayang tajit. There are three gates leading to hell: lust, anger, and greed. Every sane human being should give these up, for they lead to the degradation of the soul. In his Upadesh Amrita, Rupa Goswami instructs that devotional service is spoiled when one becomes too entangled in 6 detrimental activities, which the last one is also laulyam, but it indicates in this sense being greedy for mundane achievements. And Krishna says in the 16th chapter of Gita that one of the 26 qualities of a devotee is aloluktvam, freedom from greed. But the laulyam referenced by Ramananda Roy is completely different. For the price for achieving God's favor is simply one's sincere eagerness or greed to attain it. Yet again, in the 7th canto of the Bhagavatam, Prahlad Maharaj once went out touring the earth with some of his confidential associates. He did this just to study the nature of saintly persons. Thus, Prahlad arrived at the bank of the Kaveri, where there was a mountain known as Sakhya. There, Prahlad found a great saintly person who was lying on the ground, covered with dirt and dust, but who was deeply spiritually advanced. This Avadhuta, when questioned by Prahlad, responded in this way: Shoka moha vaya krodha raga klaibya shramadayaha yan mula sur nirnang johyat sprihang pranartayo Buddha. Those in human society who are intelligent should give up the original cause of lamentation, illusion, fear, anger, attachment, poverty, and unnecessary labor. For the original cause of all these is the desire for unnecessary prestige and money. Finally, in his Nectar of Devotion, Srila Prabhupada writes, in the Skanda Purana, there is a statement about submission unto the lotus feet of Krishna. There it is said that those who are sober devotees can offer their submission to Krishna in the following 3 ways. Number 1, samprarthanatmika, very feelingly offering prayers. Number 2, danyo vaudhika, humbling, submitting oneself. And number 3, lalasa mayi, desiring some perfectional stage. This desiring some perfectional stage in spiritual life is not the same as sense gratification. For when one realizes something of his or her constitutional relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one understands his or her original position and wants to be reinstated in this position, either as a friend, servant, parent, or conjugal lover of Krishna. And that is called lalasa mayi, or very eagerly desiring to go to one's natural position. This lalasamai stage of submission comes in the stage of perfect liberation, which technically is known as Swarupa Siddhi, when the living entity understands by spiritual advancement and revelation one's original relationship with Krishna. In the Padma Purana, there is a statement of submission in feeling by devotees praying to the Lord. Yuvati nang yatha yoni, yunang cha yuvatao yatha, mano bi ramate tadvan, mano me ramatang twayi. My Lord, I know that young girls have natural affection for young boys, and that young boys have natural affection for young girls. But I am praying at your lotus feet that my mind may become attracted unto you in the same spontaneous way. Prabhupada now explains, this example is very appropriate. When a young boy or girl sees a member of the opposite sex, there is a natural attraction without the need for any introduction. Without any training, there is a natural attraction due to the sex impulse. This is simply a material example, but still, the devotee is praying that he or she may develop a similar spontaneous attachment for the Supreme Lord, free from any desire for profit and without any other cause. This natural attraction for Krishna is the perfectional stage of self-realization. In the same Padma Purana, there is a statement about submission in humbleness. There it is stated, Mattulyo nasti papatma na paradhi cha kaschana pariharya pi lajja me king bruve purushottama. My dear Lord, there is no sinful living entity who is more of a sinner than myself, nor is there a greater offender than myself. I am so greatly sinful and offensive that when I come to confess my sinful activities before you, I become ashamed. Prabhupada comments, this is a natural position for a devotee. As far as the conditioned soul is concerned, there is no wonder that he or she has some sinful activities from one's past life, and this should be admitted and confessed before Krishna. And as soon as this is done, Krishna excuses the sincere devotee. However, that does not mean that one should take advantage of Krishna's causeless mercy and expect to be excused over and over again. And one continues to commit the same sinful activities. Such a mentality is only for shameless persons. Here it is clearly said, when I come to confess my sinful activities, I become ashamed. So if a person is not ashamed of his or her sinful activities and continues to commit the same sinful activities with the so-called knowledge that Krishna will excuse one, that is a most nonsensical proposition, and such an idea is not accepted in any part of the Vedic literature. It is a fact that by chanting the holy name of the Lord, one becomes washed clean of all sinful activities from one's past life. But that does not mean that after being washed off, one should again begin sinful activities and expect to be washed again. These are simply nonsensical propositions, and they are not admitted in devotional service. Someone may think, oh, for a whole week I may commit sinful activities, and for one day I will go to the temple or church and admit my sinful activities so that I can become washed off and again begin my sinning tomorrow. This is most nonsensical and offensive, and is not acceptable to the author of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Rupa Goswami, who is acknowledged by our spiritual master as the father of devotional service. In the Narada Pancharatra, there is a statement of submission accompanied by the desire for protection. There, the devotee prays, "My dear Lord, when shall that day come when you will ask me to fan your body, and according to your pleasure, you will say, 'Oh, just fan me in this way'?" The idea in this verse is that the devotee is desiring to personally fan the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That means that the devotee is desiring to become the personal associate of the Supreme Lord. Of course, any devotee in any capacity, either as servant, friend, or conjugal lover, always has direct association with the Lord. But according to one's different individual taste, a person desires for just one of these relationships. So here, the devotee is desiring to become a servant of the Lord and desires to fan the Lord, just as Lord Narayana's internal energy, Lakshmiji, the goddess of fortune. The devotee also wishes that the personality of Godhead will be pleased to give one directions as to how to fan. This submission with transcendental desire, or Lala-samayi Vigyapti, is the highest perfectional stage of spiritual realization. In the same Narada Pancharatra, there is another expression of submission, wherein the devotee says, "My dear Lord, O lotus-eyed one, when will that day come when on the bank of the Yamuna I shall become just like a madman, and I will continue to chant your holy name while incessant tears flow from my eyes?" That is another perfectional stage. Lord Chaitanya in his Shikshastakam also desired, "Yugaitang nameshena chakshusha pravrishayitam shunyayitang jagat sarvam govinda virahena me." A moment will appear unto me as 12 years of time, and the whole world will appear to me as vacant on account of not seeing you, my dear Govinda. So one should feelingly pray and become eager to render his or her particular type of service to Krishna. This is the teaching of all great devotees, especially Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In other words, one should learn how to cry for Krishna. One should learn this small technique, and one should be very eager and actually cry to become engaged in some particular type of service. This is called lalyam. and such tears are the price for the highest perfection. If one develops this laulium, or excessive eagerness for meeting and serving Krishna in a particular way, that is the price to enter into the kingdom of God. Otherwise, there is no material calculation for the value of the ticket by which one can enter the kingdom of God. The only price for such entrance is this laulium lalasa mai, or desire and great eagerness. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Namaste Narasimhaya, Prahlad Ahlad Dayane, Hiranya Kashipur Vakshaha, Shilatanka Nakalaye, Ito Nrsinga Padato Nrsingho, Yato Yato Yamitato Nrsingha, Bahir Nrsingho, Hridaye Nrsingho, Nrsingham Ading Sharanam Prapadye, Tavakara Kamala Vare Nakam Adbhuta Sringam, Dalita Hiranya Kashipu Tanu Bringam, Keshavadrita Narahadi Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare, Jaya Jagadisha Hare, Jaya Jagadisha Hare, Keshavadrita Nrsinga Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare, Jaya Jagadisha Hare, Jaya Jagadisha Hare, Jaya Jagadish, Jaya Jagadish, Jaya Jagadisha Hare, Hare, Jaya Jagadisha Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.